Chapter 7 Skull, Lauren Bacall, Library. Outside it was dark, it was drizzling, and the streets were filled with people going home from work. It took forever to catch a cab. Even under usual circumstances, I have a hard time catching cabs. By which I should explain that in order to avoid potentially dangerous situations, I make a point of not taking the first two empty cabs that come my way. The semiotics had fake taxis, and you sometimes heard about them swooping off with a Calcutta who'd just finished a job. Of course, these might have been rumors, since I don't know anyone it actually happened to. Still, you can't be too careful. That's why I always take the subway or bus. But this time I was so tired and drowsy that I couldn't face the prospect of cramming into a rush hour train. I decided to take a taxi, even if it took longer. Once in the cab, I nearly dozed off several times and panicked to false alert. As soon as I got home to my own bed, I could sleep to my heart's content. A cab was no place to sleep. To keep myself awake, I concentrated on the baseball game being broadcast on the cab radio. I don't follow baseball, so for convenience sake, I rooted for the team currently at bat and against the team in the field. My team was behind 3-1. It was two outs with a man on the second base when there was a hit, but the runner stumbled between the second and third, ending the side without a run. The sportscaster called it rotten playing, and even I thought so too. Sure, anyone can take a spill, but you don't stumble between second and third in the middle of a baseball game. This blunder apparently so phased my team's pitcher that he threw the opponent's lead off batter an easy ball down the middle, which the guy walloped into the left field bleachers for a home run. When the taxi reached my apartment, the score was 4-1. I paid the fare, collected my hat box and foggy brain, and got out. The drizzle had almost stopped. There wasn't a speck of mail in the mailbox, nor any messages on the answering machine. No one had any business with me, it seemed. Fine, I had no business with anyone else either. I took some ice out of the freezer, poured myself a large quantity of whiskey, and added a splash of soda. Then I got undressed and, crawling under the covers, sat up in the bed and sipped my drink. I felt like I was going to fade out any second, but I had to allow myself this luxury, a ritual interlude I like so much between the time I get into bed and the time I fall asleep. Having a drink in bed while listening to music and reading a book, as precious to me as a beautiful sunset or good clean air. I had finished half my whiskey when the telephone rang. The telephone was perched on a round table 2 meters away from the foot of the bed. I wasn't about to leave my nice warm bed and walk all the way over to it, so I simply watched the thing ring. 13 rings, 14 rings, what did I care? If this had been a cartoon, the telephone would be vibrating mid-air. But of course, that wasn't happening. The telephone remained humbly on the table, ringing on and on. I drank my whiskey and just looked at it. Next to the telephone were my wallet and knife and that gift hat box. It occurred to me that I should open it. Maybe it was something perishable that I should put in the refrigerator, something living, or even something urgent. But I was too tired. Besides, if any of the above had been the giver's intention, you would think he'd have told me about it. When the telephone stopped ringing, I bottomed up my whiskey, turned off the bedside light, and shut my eyes. A huge black net of sleep that had been poised in ambush fell over me. As I drifted off, I thought, do you really expect me to know what's going on? When at last I awoke, it was half light out. The clock read 6:15, but I couldn't tell whether it was morning or evening. I pulled on a pair of slacks and leaned out my door to check the neighbor's doormat. The morning edition was lying there, which led me to conclude it was morning. Subscribing to a paper comes in handy at times like this. Maybe I ought to. So I slept 10 hours. My body still craved rest. With nothing particular that required my attention for the day, I could happily have gone back to bed. But on second thought, I got up. Rise and shine with the sun, I always say. I took a shower, scrubbing my body well, and shaved. I did my usual 25 minutes of calisthenics. I threw together breakfast. The refrigerator was all but plundered of its contents. Time to restock. I sat down with my orange juice and wrote out a shopping list. It filled up one page and spilled over onto a second. I dumped my dirty clothes into the washing machine and was busily brushing off my tennis shoes at the sink when I remembered the old man's mystery present. Dropping the shoes, I washed my hands and went to get the hat box. Light as ever for its bulk, a nasty lightness somehow, lighter than it had any need to be. Something put me on edge, call it occupational intuition. I did a quick scan of the room. It was unnervingly quiet, almost sound removed. But my taste cough did sound like a cough. And when I flicked open my spring action knife and whacked the handle on the table, the noise was right. Having experienced sound removal, I had gotten suspicious. I opened a window onto the balcony. I could hear cars and birds. What a relief. Evolution or no evolution, the world ought to have sound. I caught the tape, careful not to damage the contents of the box. On top was crumpled newspaper. I spread open a few sheets. The Mainichi Shinbun, 3 weeks old. No news of note. I crumpled the pages up again and tossed them away. There must have been 2 weeks worth of voided newspapers in the box, all of them Mainichi. With the newspapers out of the way, I now found a layer of those polyethylene styrofoam, those pinky-sized wormwood they use for packing. I scooped them up and into the garbage they went. This was getting to be one chore of a present. With half the plastic cheese pops out of the way, there surfaced an item wrapped in more newspaper. I didn't like the look of it. I went into the kitchen and returned with a can of Coke. I sat on the edge of the bed and drank the whole thing. I trimmed the fingernail. A black-breasted bird appeared on the balcony and hopped around on the deck table, picking spryly at some crumbs. A peaceful morning scene. Eventually, I turned my attention back to the newspaper-wrapped object and gently removed it from the box. The newspaper was wound with further orbits of tape, looking very much like a piece of contemporary art, an elongated watermelon in shape, though, again, with hardly any weight to it. I cleared the table and undid the tape and newspaper. It was an animal skull. Great, I thought, just great. Did the old duffer really imagine I'd be overjoyed to receive this? He had to have a screw loose, giving a skull for a present. The skull was similar to a horse in shape, but considerably smaller. From my limited knowledge of biology, I deduced that the skull had been attached to the shoulders of a narrow-faced, hoofed herbivorous and not overly large species of mammal. Let's see now. I checked my mental catalogue of animals matching that description. Deer, goat, sheep, donkey, antelope. I couldn't remember any others. I placed the skull on top of the TV. Very stylish. If I were Ernest Hemingway, I'd have put it over the mantel, next to the moose head. But my apartment, of course, had no fireplace. No fireplace and no sideboard, not even a coat closet. So on top of the TV it was. I dumped the rest of the packing material into the trash. There at the bottom of the box was a long object rolled up in newspaper. Unwrapping it, I found a pair of stainless steel fire tongs, exactly like the ones the old man had used on his skull collection. I was reminded of the ivory baton of a Berlin Philharmonic conductor. All right, I'll play along, I said out loud. I went over to the skull on the TV and tapped it on the forehead. Out came a moan like the nasal whine of a large dog. Not the hard clunk that I had expected. Odd, yes, but nothing to get upset about. If that whiny moan was the noise it made, who was I to argue? Tapping the skull got old quick. I sat down and dialed the system to check my schedule. My rep answered and told me he'd penciled in a job 4 days hence. Was that okay? No problem, I told him. I thought about verifying the shuffling clearance, but decided not to. It would have entailed a lot of extra talk. The papers were all in order, the remuneration already squared away. Besides, the old man said he'd avoided going through agents to keep things secret. Better not complicate matters. Added to which, I was none too enthused with my rep. Tall, trim, 30ish, the type who thinks he's on the top of everything. I try my best to avoid talking with guys like that any more than I have to. I finished my business and hung up, then went into the living room and relaxed on the sofa with a beer to watch a video of Humphrey Bogart's Key Largo. I love Lauren Bacall in Key Largo. Of course, I love Bacall in The Big Sleep too, but in Key Largo, she's practically allegorical. Watching the TV screen, my eyes just naturally drifted off to the animal skull resting on top, which robbed me of my usual concentration. I stopped the video where the hurricane hits, promising myself to see the rest later, and kicked back with the beer, gazing blankly at the item atop the TV. I got the sneaking suspicion that I'd seen the skull before. But where and how? I pulled a t shirt out of a drawer and threw it over the skull so I could finish watching Key Largo. Finally, I could concentrate on Lauren Bacall. At 11 o'clock, I left the apartment, headed for the supermarket near the station, stopping next at the liquor store for some red wine, soda water, and orange juice. At the cleaners, I claimed a jacket and 2 shirts. At the stationery shop, I purchased a pen, envelopes, and letter paper. At the hardware store, the finest grain whetstones in the place. Then to the bookshop for 2 magazines, the electrical goods store for light bulbs and cassette tapes, the photo store for a pack of Polaroid film. Last, it was the record shop where I picked out a few discs. By now, the whole back seat of my tiny coupe was taken up with shopping bags. I must be a born shopper. Every time I go to town, I come back like a squirrel in November with mounds of little things. Even the car I drove was purely for shopping. I only bought it because I was already buying too much stuff to carry home by myself. I was lugging a shopping bag when I happened to pass a used car dealer and went in and saw all the different cars they had. Now, I'm not particularly crazy about cars, nor do I know much about them. So I said simply, I want a car, any make, nothing fancy, nothing big. The middle-aged salesman started to pull out a catalog, but I didn't want to look at any catalog. I only wanted a car for shopping. I told the guy, pure and simple, it didn't need to go fast for the highway, didn't need to look smart for dates, no family outings either. I had no use for a high-performance engine or air conditioning, no car stereo, no sunroof, no super radials. All I wanted was a decent compact that cornered well, didn't belch exhaust, wasn't too noisy, and wouldn't break down on me. And if it came dark blue, so much the better. The car the guy showed me was yellow. I didn't think much of the color, but otherwise it was just what I described, and because it was an old model, the price was right. This is how cars were meant to be, said the salesman. If you really want to know, I think people are nuts. No arguments from me. That's how I came to own my own shopping cart. I wound up my purchases and pulled into my convenient neighborhood fast food restaurant. I ordered shrimp, salad, onion rings, and a beer. The shrimp were straight out of the freezer, the onion rings soggy. Looking around the place, though, I failed to spot a single customer banging on a tray or complaining to a waitress. So I shut up and finished my food. Expect nothing, get nothing. From the restaurant window, I could see the expressway with the cars of all makes, colors, and styles barreling along. I remembered the jolly old man and his chubby granddaughter. No matter how much I liked them, I couldn't help thinking they had to be living in the outer limits. That inane elevator, the open pit in the back of a closet, inklings, the sound removal. I wouldn't believe it in a novel. And then they give me an animal skull as a memento. Waiting for my after-meal coffee, I thought about the chubby girl. I thought about her square earrings and pink suit and pink high heels. I thought about her body, her calves, and the flesh around her neck and the build of her face, and, well, things like that. I could recall each detail with alarming clarity, yet the composite was distinct. Curious, maybe it was because I hadn't slept with an overweight woman in a while that I couldn't picture a heavy-set woman in the altogether. The last time I slept with a fat female was the year of the Japanese Red Army shootout in Karoizawa. The woman had extraordinary thighs and hips. She was a bank teller who had always exchanged pleasantries with me over the counter. I knew her from the midriff up. We became friendly and out for a drink once, and that led up to sleeping together. Not until we were in bed did I notice that the lower half of her body was so demographically disproportionate. It was because she played table tennis all through school. She had me know. Though I didn't quite grasp the causal relationship, I didn't know table tennis led to below-the-belt corporeality. Still, her plumpness was charming. Resting an ear on her hip was like lying in a meadow on an idyllic spring afternoon, her thighs as soft as freshly aired futon, the rolling flow of her curves leading gracefully to her pubis. When I complimented her on her qualities, though, all she said was, "Oh yeah?" After I left the restaurant, I went to the library nearby. At the reference desk sat a slender young woman with her long black hair engrossed in a paperback book. Do you have any reference materials pertaining to the mammalian skull? I asked. Huh? She said, looking up. References on mammalian skulls. I repeated, saying each word separately. Mammalian skulls? She repeated, almost singing. It sounded so lovely the way she said it, like the first line of a poem. She bit her lower lip briefly and thought. Just a minute, please, I'll check, she said. Turned around to type the word mammal on her computer keyboard. Some 20 titles appeared on the screen. She used the light pen and 2/3 of the titles disappeared at once. She then hit the memory function and this time she typed the word skeleton. 7 or 8 titles appeared, of which she saved 2 and then entered into the memory alongside previous selections. Libraries have certainly come a long way. The days of card pockets inside the black sleeves of books seemed like a faded dream. As a kid, I used to love all those withdrawal date stamps. While she was nimbly operating her computer, I was looking down at her long hair and elegant backside. I didn't know exactly what to make of her. She was beautiful and seemingly quite intelligent. What with her pentameter search system, there wasn't a reason in the world not to find her appealing. She pressed the copy button for a printout of the screen data, which she handed to me. You have 9 titles to select from, she said. Number 1, A Guide to Mammals. Number 2, Pictorial Atlas of Mammals. Number 3, The Mammalian Skeleton. Number 4, The History of Mammals. Number 5, I, a Mammal. Number 6, Mammalian Anatomy. Number 7, The Mammalian Brain. Number 8, Animal Skeletons. Number 9, Bones Speak. I had an allowance of 3 books with my card. I chose number 2, 3, and 8. Number 5 and 9 did sound intriguing, but they didn't seem to have much to do with my investigation, so I left them for some other time. I'm sorry to say that Pictorial Atlas of Mammals is for library use only and cannot be borrowed overnight, she said, scratching her temple with a pen. This is extremely important. Please, do you think it would be at all possible to lend it to me just for one day? I begged. I'll have it back tomorrow noon, I promise. I'm sorry, but the Pictorial Atlas series is very popular, and these are library rules. I could get in trouble for lending out reference materials. One day, please. Nobody will find out. She hesitated, teasing the tip of her tongue between her teeth. A cute pink tongue. Okay, but it has to be back here by 9:30 in the morning. Thank you, I said. You're welcome, she said. Really, I'm very grateful. May I offer you some token of my thanks? Anything special I could do for you? Yes, as a matter of fact, there's a Baskin-Robbins ice cream parlor across the way. I'd love a double cone of mocha chip on top of pistachio. Would you mind? Mocha chip on pistachio. Coming right up. Whereupon I left the library and headed for the Baskin-Robbins. She was still not back with the books by the time I returned. So I stood there at her desk with ice cream cone in hand. 2 old men reading newspapers took turns stealing looks at this curious sight. Luckily, the ice cream was frozen solid. Having it drip all over the place was the only thing that could have made me feel more foolish. The paperback she'd been reading was face down on the desk. Time Traveler, a biography of H.G. Wells, Volume 2. It was not a library book. Next to it were 3 well-sharpened pencils and some paper clips. Paper clips everywhere I went. Paper clips. What was this? Perhaps some fluctuation in the gravitational field had suddenly inundated the world with paper clips. Perhaps it was mere coincidence. I couldn't shake the feeling that things weren't normal. Was I being staked out by paper clips? They were everywhere I went, always just a glance away. Something went ding. Come to think of it, there'd been a couple of dings lately. First animal skulls, now paper clips. It seemed as if a pattern was establishing itself. But what relationship could there be between skulls and paperclips? Before much longer, the woman returned carrying the 3 volumes. She handed them to me, accepting the ice cream cone in accents. Thank you very much, she said. Thank you, I said. She held the cone low behind the desk. Glimpsed from above, the nape of her neck was sweet and defenseless. By the way, though, why all the paperclips? I asked. Paperclips? She sang back. To keep papers together, of course. Everybody uses them, don't you? She had a point. I thanked her again and left the library. Paper clips were indeed used by everyone. 1,000 yen will buy you a lifetime supply. Sure, why not? I stopped into a stationery shop and bought myself a lifetime supply. Then I went home. Back at the apartment, I put away the groceries. I hung my clothes in the wardrobe. Then, on the top of the TV, right next to the skull, I spread a handful of paper clips. Nice and artsy, like a composition of down pillow with ice scraper, ink bottle with lettuce. I went out on the balcony to get a better look at my TV top arrangement. There was nothing to suggest how the skull and the paper clips went together, or was there? I sat down on the bed. Nothing came to mind. Time passed. An ambulance. Then a right-wing campaign soundtrack passed. I wanted a whiskey, but I passed on that too. I needed to have my brain absolutely sharp. I went to the kitchen and sat down with the library books. First, I looked up medium-sized herbivorous mammals and their skeletal structures. The world had far more medium-sized herbivorous mammals than I had imagined. No fewer than 30 varieties of deer alone. I fetched the skull from the TV, set it on the table, and began the long, laborious process of comparing it with each of the pictures in the books. 1 hour and 20 minutes and 93 species later, I had made no progress. I shot all 3 books and piled them up in one corner of the table. Then I threw up my arms and stressed. What to do? Put on a video of John Ford's Quiet Man. I was sprawled on the bed, browned, when the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw a middle-aged man in a Tokyo Gas uniform. I cracked open the door with the chain still bolted. "Routine safety check," said the man. "One moment, please," I replied, slipping into the bedroom to pocket my knife before opening the door. I smelled something fishy. There had been a gas inspector visit the month before. I let the guy in and went on watching The Quiet Man. The inspector pulled out a pressure gauge and proceeded to check the water heater for the bath, then went into the kitchen where the skull was sitting on the table. I left the TV on and tiptoed to the kitchen in time to catch him whisking the skull into a black plastic bag. I flicked open my knife and dived at him, circling around to clamp him in an arm lock. The blade thrust right under his nose. The man immediately threw the bag down. I didn't mean any harm," he stammered. "I just saw the thing and suddenly wanted it. A sudden impulse. Forgive me." "Like hell," I sneered. "Tell me the truth or I'll slit your throat," I said. It sounded unbelievably phony, especially since the knife wasn't under his chin, but the man was convinced. Okay, don't hurt me. I'll tell the truth," he whimpered. "The truth is, I got paid to come in here and steal the thing. 2 guys came up to me on the street and asked if I wanted to make a quick 50,000 yen. If I came through, I'd get another 50,000. I didn't want to do it, but one of the guys was a gorilla. Honest, please don't kill me. I've got 2 daughters in high school." "2 daughters in high school?" Yeah." "Which high school?" "The older one's a junior at Shimura Metropolitan. The younger one just started at Futaba in Yotsuya," he said. The combination was odd enough to be real. I decided to believe him. As a precaution, I fished the man's wallet out of his pocket and checked its contents. 5 crisp 10,000 yen bills, also a Tokyo Gas ID and a color photo of his family. Both daughters were done up in fancy New Year's kimono, neither of them exactly a beauty. I couldn't tell which was Shimura and which Futaba. Other than that, there was only a Sugamo Shinanomochi train pass. The guy looked harmless, so I folded the knife up and let him go. "All right, get out of here," I said, handing back his wallet. Thank you," the gas inspector said. "But what do I do now? I took their money but didn't come through with the goods." I had no idea. Those semiotics, I'm sure that's who they were, weren't what you could call gentlemen. They did whatever they felt like, whenever, which is why no one could read their modus operandi. They might gouge this guy's eyes out, or they might hand him the other 50,000 yen and wish him better luck next time. "One guy's a real gorilla, you say?" I asked. "That's right, a monster. The other guy is small, only about 1.5 meters. He was wearing a tailor-made suit. Both look like very tough characters." I instructed the man to leave the building through the parking garage. There was a narrow passage out back, which was not easy to detect. Probably he'd get away without incident. "Thank you very much," said the gas inspector. "Please don't tell my company about this." "Fine," I told him. Then I pushed him out, locked the door, and bolted the chain. I went into the kitchen and removed the skull from the plastic bag. Well, at least I'd learned one thing. The semiotics wanted the skull. I considered the circumstances. I had the skull, but didn't know what it meant. They knew what it meant, or had a vague notion of what it meant, but didn't have the skull. Even Stephen. At this point, I had two options. One, explain everything to the system so they'd protect me from the semiotics and safeguard the skull, or two, contact the chubby girl and get the lowdown on the skull. I didn't like option number one. There'd be pointless debriefings and investigations. Huge organizations and me don't get along. They are too inflexible, waste too much time, have too many stupid people. Option number two, however, was impossible. I didn't know how to go about contacting the chubby girl. I didn't have a phone number. Of course, I could have gone to the building, but leaving my own apartment now was dangerous. And how was I going to talk my way into the top security building? I made up my mind. I would do nothing. I picked up the stainless steel tongs and once again tapped the crown of the skull lightly. It made the same moan as before, a hollow, pathetic cry, almost as if it were alive. How was this possible? I picked up the skull. I tapped it again. The moan again. Upon closer scrutiny, the sound seemed to emanate from one particular point on the skull. I tapped again and eventually located the exact position. The moaning issued from a shallow depression of about 2 centimeters in diameter in the center of the forehead. I pressed my fingertip into the depression. It felt slightly rough, almost as if something had been broken off. Something, say, like a horn. A horn? If it really were a horn, that'd make it a one-horned animal. A one-horned animal? I flipped through the Pictorial Atlas of Mammals again, looking for any mammal with a single horn in the middle of its forehead. The rhinoceros was a possibility, but this was not a rhinoceros skull. Wrong size, wrong shape. I got some ice out of the refrigerator and poured myself an old crow. It was getting late in the day, and the drink seemed like a good idea. I opened a can of asparagus, which I happened to like. I canned some smoked oysters on crisp bread. I had another whiskey. Okay, for convenience sake, I agreed to entertain the remote hypothesis that the owner of the said skull might be conceivably a unicorn. What else did I have to go on? I had a unicorn skull on my hands. Great, I thought, just great. Why were all these bizarre things happening to me? What had I ever done to deserve this? I was just your practical-minded lone wolf Calcutic. I wasn't overly ambitious, wasn't greedy. Didn't have families, friends, or lovers. I saved my money. When I retired, I was planning to settle down and learn this cello or Greek. How on earth did I get mixed up in this? After that second whiskey, I opened the telephone book and dialed the number. Reference desk, please, I said. 10 seconds later, the long-haired librarian was on the line. Pictorial Atlas of Mammals here, I said.
Hello, thank you for the ice cream.
She said. You're welcome, I said. But could I ask you for another favor?
A favor?
She said.
Depends on the species of favor.
Can you look up what you've got on unicorns?
Unicorns?
She repeated. Is that too much to ask? Silence. She was probably biting her lip.
You want me to look up what about unicorns?
Everything, I said.
Please, it's 4:15. The library gets very busy around closing time. Why don't you come around first thing tomorrow morning? Then you could look up all about unicorns or tricons or whatever you like.
This can't wait. I'm afraid it's exceedingly urgent.
Oh, really?
She said.
How urgent?
It's a matter of evolution, I said.
Evolution?
She seemed to be caught off guard.
By evolution, you wouldn't be referring to the evolving over millions of years kind of evolution, would you? Excuse me if I misunderstand, but why then do you need things so quickly? What's one more day?
There's evolution that takes millions of years, and there's evolution that only takes 3 hours. I cannot explain over the phone, but I want you to believe me. This is dead urgent. This will affect the next step in human evolution.
Like 2001 A Space Odyssey?
Exactly, I said. I'd watched it countless times on video. She didn't say anything. Can't decide if I'm some kind of a maniac or a harmless nut? I took a shot.
You got it, she said.
I don't know how I'm going to convince you, but I'm really not crazy. A little narrow-minded or stubborn, maybe, but crazy I am not. was all she said to that.
Well, you talk normal enough, and you didn't seem too weird. You even bought me ice cream. All right, at 6:30, meet me at the cafe across from the library. I'll bring you the books. Fair enough?
Unfortunately, it's not so simple. I can go into details, but I can't leave my place unattended just now. Sorry, but
You mean?
she trailed off. I could hear her drumming her front teeth with her nails.
Let me get this straight. You want me to bring the books to your doorstep? You must be crazy.
That's the general idea, I said sheepishly. Though, of course, I'm not demanding, I'm requesting.
You're requesting an awful lot.
I know, I said. But you wouldn't believe what's been going on. Another lengthy silence.
I've worked in this library for 5 years now, and never have I come across any borrower as impudent as you.
She fumed.
Nobody asks to have books hand delivered, and with no previous record. Don't you think you're being just a little high handed?
Actually, I do think so too. I'm very sorry. I realize it's highly irregular, but I have no other choice,
I don't know why I'm doing this,
she said.
but I don't suppose you'd want to tell me the way to your place?